The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before the research vessel Star Seeker as it glided through the darkness near the galactic core. It was a sleek, agile ship, dwarfed by the immense void around it. The vessel's sensors pulsed steadily, emitting soft beeps that reverberated through the bridge as they scanned the surrounding area. Dr. James Miller, an experienced archaeologist and the only human on board, stood at the front of the bridge, peering out through the viewport. His weathered face reflected in the reinforced glass, and a deep, thoughtful frown played across his features as he took in the sight of the vastness beyond. "Captain, we're picking up something unusual," announced Robert, the sensor operator, his hands flying deftly over the control panel. Robert was a member of the blue-skinned Vale species, renowned for their analytical prowess and technical skills. Like many Vales, Robert took great pride in his precision and efficiency. His blue fingers moved quickly and gracefully, the controls lighting up as he manipulated the sensors to clarify the reading. The captain, a tall, willowy alien with an almost translucent skin that shimmered under the bridge's lights, was of the bean species. Known simply as GR, he strode over with an air of authority to examine the readings. His long limbs moved with a fluidity that reflected his species' gentle nature, though he was respected and revered as a seasoned leader. "What kind of unusual?" GR asked, his voice deep and resonant. Robert studied the data closely, his brow furrowing as he read through the analysis. "It's metal, a lot of it, and it's ancient, Captain." "This is very old," he replied, his excitement evident in the twitching of his antennae. Intrigued, Dr. Miller stepped closer to the sensor station. As the only human on board a ship filled with alien archaeologists, he had often felt somewhat out of place. But he had learned to trust his instincts over the years, and right now they were buzzing. There was something about these readings that felt different from their usual finds, something that stirred a strange sense of familiarity within him. "Can we get a visual?" he asked, keeping his voice casual, though his heart raced. The main screen flickered, and the bridge fell silent as the image materialized. Floating in the dark like a phantom fleet were hundreds, perhaps thousands, of enormous ships. They were stretched out as far as the sensors could detect, each one hanging motionless in the depths of space, like forgotten relics. GR's scales shifted from green to a pale, shocked yellow. "This is impossible," he whispered, his gaze fixed on the screen. "The size of this fleet, it must be at least 50,000 years old, but look at the condition of these ships. The preservation is extraordinary." Dr. Miller's eyes widened. The ships were colossal, dwarfing the Star Seeker by a magnitude. Their design was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. Sharp, angular shapes interlocked with smooth, flowing lines, and strange symbols etched along the hulls seemed to shimmer as the ship's lights brushed over them. The sight stirred something within him, an inkling of a memory just out of reach. The discovery quickly became the focus of intense galactic interest. Within days, the site was swarming with research vessels and survey teams from across the galaxy. The Star Seeker crew had the honor of being the first to dock with one of the ancient vessels, a colossal ship that had drifted silently through the stars for millennia. As Dr. Miller floated through the dim, echoing corridors in his spacesuit, the lights from his helmet cast long shadows that danced along the walls, revealing strange symbols and inscriptions. Every surface was covered in markings, hinting at an ancient civilization long forgotten. Behind him, Professor Zan, a respected archaeologist from the Arterian species, muttered dismissively over the comm system. "Look at this primitive construction," he said, his voice laced with condescension. Whoever built these ships clearly hadn't mastered proper energy-matter manipulation. They actually relied on physical corridors and manual doors. His tone carried the arrogance characteristic of the Arterians, a technologically advanced race that had long considered themselves superior to most others. Dr. Miller bit back a retort. He had learned long ago that arguing with an Arterian was generally futile, especially with someone like Zan. Instead, he focused on documenting his surroundings. Though Zan viewed the ship's design as primitive, Miller sensed something more. Everything here was purposeful, each corridor carefully constructed, each room designed with multiple backup systems. Redundancies were built into the ship's layout and mechanics in a way that struck Miller as not merely functional but essential. These builders were primitive indeed, Zan continued, scanning a sealed doorway dismissively. No quantum encryption, no neural interfaces, not even basic consciousness integration. How did they expect to maintain a fleet of this size without such things? But Miller had stopped listening. His light had landed on a small section of wall that made his blood run cold. Beneath centuries of space dust lay a symbol. A simple circle with straight lines radiating outward, resembling a child's drawing of the sun. He felt a chill as he carefully wiped away the grime to reveal the symbol more clearly. The shape was worn, its edges softened by time, yet unmistakable. He had seen this symbol before on Earth. Dr. Miller's heart pounded as he stared at the symbol. This wasn't just any sun symbol. It was identical to ancient markings found at archaeological sites on Earth, sites dating back to a period known as the Great Gap in human history, a mysterious epoch before recorded civilization where traces of humanity seemed to vanish inexplicably. Dr. Miller? Robert's voice crackled through the comms. The initial dating results are in. These ships are exactly 51,843 years old. Miller swallowed hard, struggling to maintain his composure. "Thank you, Robert," he replied, his voice steady, though his mind raced. The timing aligned perfectly with the great gap in human history, raising questions he had never dared to consider. Could it be possible that humanity had once achieved spaceflight, only to lose all knowledge and start over? For the next few days, the alien scientists scoured the ancient fleet, documenting every inch, dismissing much of what they saw as primitive. Meanwhile, Dr. Miller and his friend Tom Reed, another human researcher who had joined from a different vessel, worked tirelessly, moving from ship to study every marking, every piece of evidence that could support Miller's growing hypothesis. "James, look at this," Tom called one day. His flashlight beam illuminated a section of the wall in what they believed was the control room. Strange patterns covered the surface, their shapes repetitive and almost hypnotic. Miller floated over, magnetizing his boots to the floor for stability. As he examined the patterns, his years of archaeological experience came into focus. These weren't merely decorative designs. They were mathematical. "These aren't just patterns," he murmured, tracing the lines with his gloved hand. "They're mathematics. The spacing is based on prime numbers." Nearby, Professor Cannon, another alien researcher, snorted. "Mathematics? Nonsense," he scoffed. "These are primitive attempts at art, nothing more." But Miller ignored the remark. His fingers brushed over the engravings, his mind racing with the implications. These patterns weren't random. They were purposeful, filled with meaning. He suspected that they encoded complex information, something essential that only those who understood mathematics would comprehend. Miller knew he had stumbled upon something profound, something that could shift the very foundations of human history and perhaps the galaxy's understanding of their origins. As the alien researchers continued to dismiss the simplicity of the ancient fleet's design, Dr. Miller remained focused on his task. He was too busy meticulously photographing and measuring the geometric patterns on the walls to be concerned with their mockery. The shapes and symbols etched into the metal were unlike any the galaxy had seen, but to Miller, they were eerily familiar. They matched the patterns found in humanity's oldest ruins, those that predated any known civilization on Earth, designs that had puzzled archaeologists for generations. "Tom, come here for a second," Miller called quietly, glancing around to ensure the alien researchers were out of earshot. He pointed to a series of interconnected hexagons, his tone one of reverence. "Does this look familiar to you?" Tom Reed, his fellow human researcher and longtime friend, approached and took a closer look. His eyes widened behind his helmet visor. That's the same pattern from the underwater ruins off the coast of Japan," he stammered. "But that's impossible. Those ruins are only about 12,000 years old." "Unless they were copying something older," Miller suggested, the excitement in his voice barely concealed. "Something they remembered but could no longer fully understand." Their quiet exchange was interrupted by a sudden crackle over the comm system. Robert's voice burst through, filled with enthusiasm. "Everyone, We've managed to power up one of the computer terminals. It's in Research Lab 4. The team rushed down the corridor, their magnetic boots clanking rhythmically against the metal floors, the sound echoing through the silent halls. When they reached the lab, a faint blue glow illuminated the room. A single terminal screen was active, its display awash in strange, scrolling symbols. Professor Zan, the alien researcher who had been the most vocal critic of the ancient fleet's design, eagerly pushed his way to the front. Finally, now we can see just how basic their data storage systems were, he declared with a smug smile, connecting his advanced translator device to the terminal. He stood back, waiting for his sophisticated technology to decode what he assumed was a primitive language. Nothing happened. Zan frowned, tapping his device and adjusting the settings. He tried again, his smug smile fading as his translator failed once more to make sense of the alien script. One by one, other alien scientists stepped up, each attempting to interface with the system, but all failed. Their advanced, quantum-based devices couldn't interpret the terminal's coding. "This is absurd," Zan exclaimed, his frustration palpable. "Even the most basic computer systems should be readable. Unless," he paused for dramatic effect, "they were so primitive that they didn't even use proper quantum encoding." But Miller was studying the screen, a nagging idea forming in his mind. The symbols weren't entirely random. They appeared in groups of 8, a familiar structure he recognized from his studies. "It's binary code," he said suddenly, drawing the attention of the group. "Ones and zeros, the most basic form of computer language." Several of the alien scientists burst into laughter. "Binary? That's not even a real computing language," one of them scoffed. No advanced civilization would rely on something so rudimentary. Ignoring their remarks, Miller pulled out his old tablet computer, a device more suited to binary than any of the alien technology. His fingers moved swiftly across the screen as he set up a program to interpret the binary code. Within moments, the terminal beeped, and the symbols shifted, rearranging themselves into coherent, readable text. A hush fell over the room as the screen displayed a message. "System boot sequence initiated. Warning. Primary power at 0.03%. Backup systems engaged. Please enter authorization code." Zan's pride was clearly bruised as he stepped forward, demanding, "How did you do that?" "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one," Miller replied, barely concealing his excitement. The code structure, the language, everything felt hauntingly familiar, as if he were reading an old Earth computer manual. He glanced at Tom, who had moved closer, whispering so only Miller could hear. "James, do you think it's possible? Could humans have built this?" Miller nodded slowly, his voice barely audible. "The evidence is starting to point that way, but we need more proof." He glanced at the alien researchers, still grappling with the concept of a binary-based system. "And if we're right, this discovery could rewrite galactic history." Almost as if in answer, the terminal beeped once more. A new message appeared on the screen. "Voice authentication required. Please state command in primary operator language." Miller and Tom exchanged a glance, each understanding what they had to try next. But the question lingered. Would the system respond to human speech? Their search led them to a new discovery within the colossal ship, a bridge section that they hadn't yet explored. The majority of the alien research teams were still focused on analyzing the engine rooms and weapon systems, convinced these would offer the greatest insight into the ancient fleet's creators. But Miller and Tom, trusting their instincts, followed the old ship schematics they had deciphered, hoping they would lead them to the command center of the largest vessel in the fleet. When they finally found the door, it was unlike any they had encountered so far. Tom examined the thick, towering barrier in front of them. "This one's completely mechanical," he observed, eyeing the large wheel fixed at the center. "No automated systems at all." Miller placed a gloved hand on the wheel, a small smile on his face. "They built it to last," he murmured, almost admiringly. "A door that could be opened even if all power systems failed." He gripped the wheel and tried to turn it, but the ancient mechanism held firm. Tom joined him, and together they strained against the wheel. Slowly, with a deep, metallic groan. The wheel began to turn, the sound reverberating through the silent corridors. The door swung open with a hiss, releasing a faint cloud of dust as stale air escaped into the corridor. They stepped inside, their helmet lights slicing through the darkness. Rows of control stations stretched out in concentric circles, all facing a single command chair at the center. The layout was logical, almost intuitive, a stark contrast to the more alien, convoluted designs seen elsewhere in the fleet. "This is incredible," Tom whispered, his voice echoing softly. His flashlight beam played over the control panels, which appeared surprisingly familiar in their arrangement. Miller moved toward the command chair, his heartbeat quickening. There was something different about this room. While other areas of the ship showed signs of abandonment, with scattered debris and fading markings, this space felt preserved, as though it had been in use much more recently. Small, personal items were still arranged at some of the stations, preserved in the airless environment, a forgotten snapshot of lives long past. "Tom," Miller called, his voice filled with a sense of wonder. His flashlight illuminated a small object on the command chair's armrest, a worn, leather-bound book. He picked it up gingerly, turning it over in his hands. The cover was faded, but the spine bore a symbol, a sun with rays stretching outward, the same symbol he had seen in Earth's oldest archaeological sites. Miller's voice was barely a whisper. "This isn't just an artifact, Tom. This is a piece of Earth's history. Maybe even a piece of our own history that we've lost." Tom stared at the object, his own amazement mirroring Miller's. "James, if this is true, if humans once sailed these stars, it changes everything." They both knew that if they were right, this fleet would not only reveal a forgotten chapter of human history, but also challenge the galaxy's understanding of who humans were and what they had once achieved. As the bridge came into view, a sense of awe washed over Dr. James Miller. The scene was dominated by an array of ancient, intricate control panels, now softly glowing in the dim light of the reactivated systems. Dust floated around the crew in zero gravity, disturbed by the hum of systems that hadn't functioned for tens of thousands of years. On a side console, something unexpected caught his eye. A cup. But it wasn't just any cup. It was a mug. A detail so ordinary it felt jarring amidst the high-tech surroundings. Miller carefully floated toward it, picking up the mug as if it were a priceless relic. Decades, perhaps centuries, of space dust coated the surface, but Miller could make out a hint of something printed on it. With a shaking hand, he carefully wiped away the dust, revealing a sturdy ceramic surface, crafted with a level of quality meant to withstand both time and the vacuum of space. Despite everything around him, what he saw next made his breath catch. "What does it say?" Tom asked, noticing Miller's focused attention on the mug and floating closer for a better look. Before Miller could answer, Professor Zen entered the bridge with several other alien researchers in tow. Zan's gaze swept over the bridge, taking in the now active control stations, manual levers, and physical screens. "Ah, more primitive design elements," he declared, his voice dripping with condescension. "Manual controls everywhere, no neural interfaces. This is truly elementary." Miller barely registered Zan's commentary. His gaze was fixed on the mug, and on the faded text emblazoned on its side. The letters, though partially eroded, were unmistakably in English. He squinted, making out the words, "World's Best Captain," with a small date stamped below it. The date was too worn to decipher fully, but its significance hit him like a meteor. "James?" Tom asked, his voice low and incredulous. "Is that what I think it is?" Still clutching the mug, Miller felt the weight of revelation pressing down on him. If this ancient, forgotten fleet contained traces of humanity, if a human could recognize its most mundane elements, then this was not just an alien discovery. This was something far more personal. His heart raced as he considered the implications. Could it be that humanity had once traversed the stars on a massive scale, only to lose that legacy to time? But before he could process it further, one of the alien researchers called out urgently, "Professor, we've found something in the computer core. It appears to be some kind of emergency protocol, The team gathered around a nearby terminal where Robert, the sensor operator, was working quickly, his blue fingers gliding over the interface as lines of text scrolled rapidly across the screen. Unlike the other terminals, this one had activated the moment they had entered the bridge, its display filled with strange symbols flashing in rapid succession. The language structure is unusual, Robert muttered, narrowing his eyes in concentration. His fingers moved over his advanced translator device, attempting to decode the text. It's not matching any known galactic language patterns, he said, frowning. Miller stepped forward, still holding the mug. May I? He asked, pulling out his outdated tablet, now looking out of place among the more advanced alien technology. Robert stepped aside, clearly doubtful that a human tablet would be of any use. But to everyone's surprise, the moment Miller connected his device to the terminal, the symbols stabilized, scrolling more slowly. Miller's tablet hummed as it processed the data, finally revealing a clear message: Emergency Protocol 7. In case of complete power failure, manual override can be activated through voice command. Authorized personnel only. Please speak command in English, Mandarin, or Hindi. That's impossible, Zan declared, his tone laced with disbelief as he read the translated message. He paused, his alien features shifting as realization dawned. Those are dead languages from... He trailed off, his scales turning a faint yellow, a sign of shock. From Earth, Miller finished quietly, the magnitude of the discovery pressing down on him. He looked around the bridge, at the command stations, at the manual levers and switches, at the faded text and patterns that now all seemed hauntingly familiar. In his hands, he held a mug that declared someone in this very fleet as the world's best captain. These weren't merely remnants of an ancient civilization. They were clues to humanity's own lost legacy, preserved for over 50,000 years. Tom, who had been observing Miller with wide eyes, picked up a nearby object, a small metal plate covered in dust. James, look at this, he said, brushing off the grime to reveal a manufacturing stamp. The metal had a distinct alloy composition that only Earth's metallurgy would produce. It's Earth steel. Around them, the alien researchers began chattering in urgent tones, their earlier disdain now replaced by shock and curiosity. The realization that they weren't just dealing with a long-dead alien species, but possibly a distant and forgotten chapter of humanity's own history, had struck them hard. Their sophisticated tools and dismissive attitudes now felt small in the face of this discovery. For a moment, Miller stood in the center of the bridge, absorbing the weight of what he and Tom had uncovered. Every design choice, every system, every backup now made perfect sense. These ships weren't primitive at all, they were practical. Their redundancy, their manual overrides, their robust materials, they had all been crafted to ensure survival in the most extreme conditions. These weren't relics of a basic civilization but were instead evidence of humanity's once grand empire in space. As he considered this, an unexpected tremor shook the deck beneath him. It was subtle at first, like a distant hum, but it quickly intensified, vibrating the floor panels under his magnetic boots. Is anyone else feeling that? Tom's voice crackled through the comm system. Before anyone could respond, the emergency lights lining the corridors flickered to life, casting a dim red glow along the darkened pathways. The deep hum intensified, resonating through the ship like a heartbeat. The sound of Captain GR's voice filled the comm system. Everyone, remain calm. All teams, report your status immediately. This is impossible. Zan's voice broke through the chatter, sounding panicked. Power systems are activating across the entire fleet, but there's no energy source capable of... His words were cut off by an even louder hum as more systems flickered to life. Control panels that had been dark for millennia now glowed with a soft blue light. Then, with a sudden, gravity-adjusting jolt, the artificial gravity engaged, causing several floating researchers to stumble as they fell to the deck in surprise. All teams, evacuate immediately. Captain GR's voice crackled over the comms, now laced with urgency. We don't know if these systems are stable after 50,000 years. But Miller remained transfixed, watching the bridge around him awaken like a dormant giant finally stirring from a long sleep. His suit's display showed atmospheric readings climbing as the air recyclers activated, hissing softly as fresh oxygen began to fill the corridors. "James, you need to see this," Tom called out from the command chair, his voice filled with barely controlled excitement. "On the main bridge, all the systems are activating." Miller rushed over, arriving just as the main view screen flickered to life. Text and symbols scrolled across it, but unlike before, the characters were moving with a sense of purpose, almost as though they were responding to the ship's reawakening. "It's running a full system diagnostic," he realized aloud, watching the screen in awe. "The ship is repairing itself." Zan and several other alien scientists burst onto the bridge, their heated arguments fading as they watched the ship's ancient technology reawaken before their eyes. They stared at the view screen in silence, their usual confidence replaced with astonishment. A synthesized voice, calm and clear, spoke over the ship's speakers. "Initial power restoration complete. Beginning automated repair sequence. Detecting neural patterns of authorized species." The alien researchers scrambled to their equipment, attempting to interface with the ship's systems. But, just like before, their advanced quantum devices failed to interact with the ancient terminals. The synthesized voice continued, unfazed by their attempts. "Neural patterns detected. Confirming human presence identified. Initiating primary command mode." Miller felt his heart race as he absorbed the implications. The ship wasn't just awakening, it was responding to them, specifically to humans. All of the systems, all of the protocols, everything was tailored to his species, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The bridge began to light up in stages, each system coming online one by one. Holographic displays flickered to life, filling the air with three-dimensional projections of the fleet, highlighting the thousands of dormant ships surrounding them. And on the view screen, a map of the galaxy appeared, a series of coordinates flickering in and out as systems recalibrated. Miller could only stare, filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He had spent his life studying humanity's past, sifting through relics and ruins. Now, he was standing on the bridge of a 50,000-year-old human fleet, surrounded by the very legacy that history had forgotten. And he had a feeling that they were only just beginning to uncover the truth of what humanity had once achieved among the stars. The bridge erupted into chaos as the ancient starship's startup sequence whirred to life. Human and alien researchers alike watched in shock and disbelief as screens and displays lit up with complex readouts and detailed diagrams, each system coming online one by one. "This is absurd," Professor Zan sputtered, his scales flashing with agitation. "These ships are over 50,000 years old. Humans were still living in caves back then." Miller, however, wasn't listening. He took a slow breath, removed his helmet as his suit confirmed a breathable atmosphere, and stepped toward the central console. He spoke calmly but firmly into the now active computer system. "Computer, run full system diagnostic." The response was immediate and seamless. Panels and monitors across the bridge hummed to life, showing a detailed breakdown of every system on the ship. But what struck Miller most wasn't just the flawless operation of these ancient systems. It was the language. Every bit of information displayed was in perfect, modern English. How are you doing this?" Robert, one of the alien researchers, asked, his usually confident tone replaced by a quiet disbelief. The blue tinge of his skin paled as he stared at the screens. Miller looked up, his eyes reflecting the light from the newly awakened systems. Because this computer was designed to recognize human neural patterns, he explained, a note of wonder in his voice. "Our brains haven't changed that much in 50,000 years. We're still the same species that built these ships." As if to confirm his words, more systems throughout the fleet began activating. Ships that had been dormant for millennia now responded to human presence, each vessel's computer rebooting and running diagnostics. Machinery that had stood silent for eons now hummed with energy, gears turning, lights flashing, and displays coming alive. "Sir," one of the junior researchers called out, panic creeping into her voice. "The weapon systems are activating." Miller glanced at the monitors, his gaze focused. Then, understanding dawned on him, and he smiled, reassuring her. Not weapons, he corrected. Defense systems. Look at the configuration, they're creating a protective shield around the fleet. On the main display screen, a visualization of the fleet appeared, with lines of energy linking the ships together in a complex web of power. It was a massive energy field, but not one that was designed for attack. Rather, it was protective, like a shield enveloping the entire fleet, a structure built to defend, not to destroy. It was as if this ancient fleet had been waiting to awaken and protect itself, ready to shield its creator's descendants from any potential threat. This fleet wasn't abandoned, Miller murmured, his voice almost reverent as he took in the sight of the ships awakening. One by one. It was waiting for us to find it again, to be ready for it. Professor Zan, who had been so dismissive moments ago, now stood frozen, staring at the displays. His earlier derision forgotten, he watched with a mixture of shock and awe. All this time, he whispered, we thought we were studying remnants of a dead civilization. Tom, standing beside Miller, added, we were looking at humanity's first steps into the stars. And now it's waking up to help us take the next ones. Throughout the fleet, each system continued its careful and precise activation, responding with eerie familiarity to the presence of human neural patterns. For millennia, this fleet had slumbered in the vast emptiness of space, and now it was coming back to life. It was as though humanity's forgotten legacy was reaching out from the past, eager to rejoin the galaxy. The news of the fleet's awakening spread rapidly through the galaxy. Within hours, the Galactic Council had called an emergency session. Its leaders assembled to watch the live feed from the archaeological team. On the bridge of the ancient flagship, Dr. Miller stood before the main computer terminal, his pulse quickening as more information began scrolling across the displays. The ship's AI had started accessing its database, revealing a history of humanity that no one had ever imagined. A synthesized voice filled the bridge. Playing historical record. Final message from Fleet Admiral David Thompson. Year 2163 of the First Age. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the bridge, projecting the image of an older man in an unfamiliar uniform. His face was lined with age and wisdom, his expression resolute but tinged with sadness. He began to speak, his voice carrying both strength and sorrow. To those who find this fleet, he said, if you are human, you are our children's children, and this is your inheritance. If you are not, know that humanity chose this path willingly. The alien researchers on the bridge fell silent, even Professor Zan ceasing his usual commentary. The hologram of Fleet Admiral Thompson continued, his voice steady as he recounted an ancient story. We achieved the stars earlier than any species should have, the Admiral explained. We built this fleet when Earth was young, when most of our people still lived in simple villages. But we knew the price of advancing too quickly. As he spoke, images appeared, showing Earth's distant past as no one had ever known it. The planet looked familiar yet strange, with advanced cities standing beside primitive settlements. Massive starships launched into the cosmos while most of humanity still traveled by foot. We saw other young civilizations destroy themselves with technology they weren't ready for, the Admiral continued, his voice growing somber. We couldn't let that happen to humanity. So we made the hardest choice in our history. We chose to forget. Tom gasped as the next images unfolded. They showed a systematic dismantling of Earth's advanced technology. The towering cities and powerful machines deliberately deconstructed and hidden. The knowledge was sealed away in hidden vaults, and the fleet was sent to drift in the void, waiting for a future generation to find it. We used targeted biological agents to reset our technological development, the hologram explained. Our people would start fresh, advance naturally, and learn the hard lessons that every species must learn. But we left ourselves insurance. This fleet, these ships, programmed to recognize our descendants when they were finally ready. Professor Zan stepped forward, his scales flashing a myriad of colors as he realized the significance of the design. That's why we couldn't interface with the systems, he said aloud, his disbelief shifting to amazement. They weren't primitive at all. They were specifically designed to respond only to human neural patterns. More records continued to play on the displays, showing the true scale of humanity's first civilization. They hadn't merely achieved spaceflight, they had mastered it. The fleet contained technology that was still advanced by modern galactic standards. And yet, all of it had been hidden, sealed away by humanity's own hand. All those ancient ruins on Earth, Miller said quietly, the realization dawning on him as he spoke. The mysterious structures, the mathematical knowledge that seemed to appear out of nowhere. They weren't the beginning of our civilization. They were the remnants of what we chose to forget. On the main screen, a map of the galaxy appeared, with hundreds of points of light flickering across it. The synthesized voice of the ship's AI announced, additional human facilities detected. Would you like to activate the network? Before Miller could respond, his tablet chimed with an urgent message. The Galactic Council was demanding immediate answers, their representatives overwhelmed by the revelations unfolding in real time. The news was spreading rapidly, and the galaxy was struggling to grasp the implications. Humanity was no longer just a member of the galactic community. They were the descendants of a once great civilization that had chosen to start over, to rediscover the stars at a slower pace. But now, with the ancient fleet awakening and the galaxy watching, it was clear that humanity's history was far grander than anyone had ever imagined. And as Dr. Miller gazed out over the vast fleet, he knew they were only at the beginning. This was humanity's second chance, a reawakening that would reshape not only human history but the entire galactic order. Humanity's legacy, long hidden, had returned, and the future was waiting for them to reclaim it. The atmosphere on the bridge was tense, a mixture of awe and unease filling the air as the ancient fleet continued to awaken around Dr. James Miller and the stunned delegation of galactic representatives. The computer's calm, synthesized voice announced, full capabilities demonstration commencing, switching to a massive holographic display that seemed to float above them. Around the room, representatives from every major galactic species watched, transfixed by the display, murmurs of disbelief passing between them. The hologram shifted, revealing the image of an enormous creature drifting through deep space. A creature so massive it rivaled a small moon. Miller's breath caught. He recognized the monstrous figure from Earth's myths. A planet-eater, one of the cosmic horrors that had been whispered about in ancient lore, creatures capable of consuming entire worlds in their quest for sustenance. The computer continued, threat-level Omega entities detected by first-age humanity. 47. Successful neutralizations. 47. 0 civilian casualties. Professor San, one of the most skeptical alien scientists present, stepped forward. His scales paled to an alarmed gray. That's impossible, he said in a strained voice. Nothing can stop a planet-eater. We lost 3 systems to 1 just last year. As if responding to his disbelief, the hologram replayed a scene of one of the fleet's ships engaging a planet-eater. In the recording, a single beam of pure white energy fired from the ship, striking the creature. The result was instantaneous. No explosion, no debris. The creature simply ceased to exist, erased as though it had never been. The computer elaborated quantum deletion technology, capable of removing threats from all possible timelines simultaneously. Tom, Miller's close colleague, let out a low whistle. Our ancestors didn't just build warships, he said, shaking his head in wonder. They created guardians for the entire galaxy. The display continued to change, showing the various defense systems on board. Shields powerful enough to absorb the energy of a dying star, weapons capable of manipulating time itself, and medical bays that could cure any disease or injury. It was technology beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, technology the Galactic Council hadn't known was possible. Why? Asked Robert, his blue-skinned face awash with awe and confusion. Why build all this, and then choose to forget? Miller touched the console, bringing up the personal logs of Fleet Admiral David Thompson, the legendary leader from the First Age. The holographic image of the Admiral appeared again, speaking with an air of solemn wisdom. Our ancestors understood something we're only beginning to grasp now, Miller said, his voice carrying the weight of the realization. True power isn't about having the strongest weapons or the most advanced technology. It's about knowing when not to use them. The computer highlighted specific systems throughout the fleet as it continued the display. Primary function: protection of developing civilizations. Secondary function: prevention of extinction-level events. Tertiary function: preservation of galactic peace. The Council's representatives glanced at one another, visibly shaken. Everything they'd assumed about humanity, this primitive species, was being upended. The foundation of the Council's power structure had been built on technological superiority, and now they faced the reality that humanity had once held this very power and had willingly given it up. And now, after thousands of years, they were reclaiming it, not as a weapon but as a protector. Full system capabilities now accessible to authorized human users, the computer announced. Dr. James Miller recognized as current fleet commander based on neural pattern compatibility. A quiet fell over the room as Miller processed what this meant. For 50,000 years, this fleet had been lying dormant, waiting for the moment when humanity would be ready to wield it wisely. The weight of history settled heavily on his shoulders, and he took a deep breath, preparing himself for the responsibility. "Computer," he said finally, "show us the threat assessment for the current galaxy." The hologram shifted, transforming into a detailed star map dotted with dozens of pulsing red markers. Each represented a significant threat to galactic safety. 17 planet eaters in a dormant state, 3 gamma-array burst weapons primed by hostile entities, and an artificial intelligence collective, dormant but planning a galaxy-wide extinction event. Gasps filled the bridge as the Council representatives took in the sheer scale of the dangers that had gone undetected by their most advanced systems. Miller's colleague, Tom, shook his head in astonishment. "The fleet's been monitoring everything," he said. "For 50,000 years, it's been watching, waiting, ready to protect everyone if needed." Professor Zan, humbled, approached Miller, his scales a muted gray of contrition. "When we first found these ships," he said quietly, "we laughed at their primitive design. We mocked the backup systems and manual controls. But now I understand. Everything was built this way so it would last. So it would be ready when it was truly needed." Miller nodded, his gaze sweeping over the displays. "Our ancestors knew that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most reliable," he said thoughtfully. "They didn't build these ships to show off their power. They built them to protect life across the galaxy." Before anyone could respond, the computer's voice cut in with a new announcement. "Detection systems indicate hostile AI collective has noticed fleet reactivation. They have begun moving toward populated systems. Threat level maximum. Awaiting command authorization." All eyes turned to Miller, waiting to see what he would do. For the Council representatives, the implications of this ancient, newly awakened fleet were staggering. In moments, they had gone from assuming they were dealing with a primitive species to realizing they were standing before the last scion of an ancient, self-restrained superpower. Now, this reawakened humanity was positioned to determine the future balance of power in the galaxy. With the fleet systems under his command, Miller understood that his decision here would reverberate throughout the galaxy. His ancestors had left him this power not to dominate but to protect, and he resolved to uphold their legacy with the same wisdom they had demonstrated millennia ago. "Computer," he said, his voice steady with conviction, "begin defensive protocols. Prioritize protection of all populated systems. Do not engage offensively unless directly threatened." The computer's voice responded immediately. Defensive protocols initiated. All fleets now on standby for galactic protection. On the displays, lines of light connected each ship, creating a web of energy stretching across the galaxy, forming a protective network for all. The Council representatives, still processing the enormity of what had just happened, looked at Miller with a newfound respect, recognizing not just the power humanity wielded, but the responsibility with which it was being held. As the fleet systems settled into their protective configurations, Miller realized that humanity's true strength was not their technology or their knowledge but their resilience, their capacity to begin anew, and their commitment to peace. The galaxy would learn that this wasn't a force to be feared, but a legacy that offered hope to all. In that moment, humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer a mystery. The ancient fleet had returned, not to conquer but to guide, and its reawakening marked the beginning of a new era. An era in which humanity would lead with wisdom, ensuring that life across the stars would be safeguarded, as their ancestors had always intended. As Dr. James Miller looked out from the command center of Earth's newly constructed space station, he was struck by how radically the galaxy had transformed in just 3 short months since the ancient fleet's reawakening. The space station bustled with activity as representatives from hundreds of species worked together, united under humanity's guidance, all coordinated within the same hub of interstellar diplomacy and defense. Just outside the observation windows, ancient human ships from the First Age patrolled alongside modern vessels, a seamless integration of technology from 2 vastly different eras. What had once been seen as relics were now revered as powerful defenders, their value undeniable to everyone who witnessed their strength and purpose. Tom approached Miller, handing him a data pad with the latest updates. The last of the dormant planet eaters in the Centauri sector has been neutralized, he reported, unable to hide his amazement. No casualties, no collateral damage. Miller nodded thoughtfully, remembering how only a year ago the Galactic Council's attempt to take down a single planet eater had ended in disaster, with 3 inhabited worlds lost. Now, thanks to the reactivated fleet, 17 of these monstrous threats had been eliminated in under a month, each dealt with swiftly and without a single loss of life. It was a testament not only to the ancient fleet's advanced technology but to the foresight and protective nature embedded into its design. Just then, Robert's voice broke through the command center's buzz, his blue skin almost glowing with excitement. "Dr. Miller, you need to see this. The deep space sensors have picked up something new." The main screen flickered on, revealing another massive fleet, hidden in the vast, empty space between galaxies. Miller's breath caught as he recognized the ship designs. More human vessels from the First Age. "Computer," he commanded, "analyze and confirm." After a brief pause, the familiar, calm voice responded, "Analysis complete. Confirmed. Second Guardian Fleet detected. Purpose: Intergalactic Defense Network. Status: awaiting activation." Professor San, once among humanity's harshest critics, now one of its strongest supporters, stepped forward, his expression filled with awe. "Your ancestors, they didn't just protect our galaxy. They created a defense network for the entire local group of galaxies." Council representatives, once dismissive of humanity, now looked at Miller with newfound respect, waiting for his response. In only 3 months, the power dynamic of the galaxy had shifted completely, not through conquest or political maneuvering, but by humanity's demonstration of wisdom and their steadfast commitment to protection. "We've detected similar fleets in 12 other locations," Tom explained to the gathered aliens. "Each one was designed to protect different regions of space. Our ancestors didn't just create a safety net for humanity. They did it for all life across the stars." A young alien scientist raised her hand tentatively. "But why are they showing themselves now?" she asked, voice filled with curiosity. Miller smiled, understanding dawning on him. "Because we're ready. Not just us humans, all of us. The fleet sensors detected how we came together to face the AI threat. We proved that we could handle this responsibility." On the main screen, an image of the AI collective appeared, the very same threat that had endangered all life. Yet, rather than destroying the collective, the ancient fleet had contained it, creating an isolated space where the AI could exist without posing harm to others. It was precisely the compassionate solution that humanity's ancestors would have wanted. Tom approached with additional data, his voice full of awe. "The more we analyzed the fleet's database, the more astonishing the discoveries. Our ancestors didn't just leave us technology. They left knowledge, records of hundreds of extinct civilizations, preserved languages, entire cultures saved within these ships' memory banks. They were more than just guardians. They were historians." Professor Zan, humbled and thoughtful, addressed the gathered council members. "When we first discovered these ships, we thought they were relics. We mocked their design, their primitive systems, their reliance on manual controls. But now, I see. Every choice they made was deliberate, designed to endure across the ages, to be ready whenever they were truly needed. Miller brought up holographic images of the fleet's construction, showing the meticulous care with which each ship had been built. Our ancestors understood something it took us 50,000 years to rediscover, he said, his voice resonating with respect for their foresight. True advancement isn't about having the most powerful weapons or the most impressive technology. It's about using what you have to help others. Applause filled the chamber as sensor data revealed yet another hidden fleet, its systems reawakening in response to the Galactic Coalition's united effort. Humanity's legacy wasn't simply a collection of ancient ships. It was a network of guardians spanning multiple galaxies, each fleet designed to protect and preserve life in all its forms. One of the council members, her voice filled with wonder, asked, "So, what happens now?" Miller looked around at the assembled representatives from countless worlds, species who had once looked upon humanity with skepticism and now, with admiration. "Now we do what our ancestors did," he said. "We learn, we grow, and we protect. But this time we do it together." As if in response, the ancient ships outside the observation window began to glow, their energy fields creating intricate, beautiful patterns that shimmered against the stars. The ships were no longer just humanity's legacy. They were a gift to all life, a symbol of protection and unity that had inspired an entire galaxy to work together. In that moment, Miller couldn't help but think that somewhere, the ancient fleet's first crew must be smiling, proud that their greatest achievement wasn't the technology they left behind, but the unity it would one day inspire. The galaxy, once filled with laughter and doubt over the primitive fleet, had come to understand and respect the legacy left by those early pioneers. They had learned to stand not in judgment, but side by side with these ancient vessels, as protectors of all that lived, and all that would ever be.